Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ecommerce Espresso. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. Ecommerce Espresso is LoyaltyLion's quick but insightful webinar series that is shorter than your coffee break. To keep things quick and valuable, we won't be doing a Q&A. However, if you have any questions, please feel free to tweet us at LoyaltyLionHQ using the hashtag Ecommerce Espresso. So I hope everyone has their coffees ready because we're about to jump straight into it. So today I'd like to introduce our guest. Adii, would you like to introduce yourself and maybe give us a bit more information about CM Commerce?
Sure, and thanks for having me, Caitlin. So I currently run CM Commerce, of which I'm the founder, where we build email marketing automation software. And our kind of just vision, which is on the screen there, is really kind of taking the guesswork and time investment out of email marketing. And beyond that, kind of in my former life, at least, I was co-founder in WooThemes and WooCommerce as well. So I've been in the kind of broader e-commerce ecosystem for 10, 11, 12 years at this stage.
That's great. It sounds like you're definitely the right person to have on board for this episode. Perfect. I'll get stuck into our first question. So our first question for you is, what email marketing campaigns have stood out to you the most in 2020 so far?
Yeah, so I think this is obviously an interesting question given just the kind of what is happening in our world at this stage. And I think like answering this question today versus answering this question in any previous year would have been very different, right? So what I've seen though, and I think what is working best at this stage is where kind of the email marketing is really very conversational, right? And very personalized. So we often speak about personalization in email, about segmentation and, adding someone's first name, all of those kind of things. But that's not the kind of personalization I mean. I literally think the campaigns that have worked best are campaigns that firstly come across as literally me having a conversation with my subscriber, with my customer, right? And then where that actually kind of sparks actual one-on-one conversation. Because I think in those kind of, we have to consider that, what customers and subscribers most want at this stage, likely, if you consider Maslow's hierarchy here, is connection. And I think the email campaigns that have worked best is kind of ones that gives people some sense of connectiveness, right? And I think, so as concrete examples here, to the contrary, I think campaigns, for example, any kind of flash sale, anything that is driving, artificial urgency or scarcity, like I think those things have missed the mark, right? I think they've probably, some of them might have worked well, but if you're in South Africa, for example, where I'm at, and you were trying to sell alcohol just before our lockdown, then you obviously kind of made a lot of money very quickly because we weren't allowed to buy alcohol. So somewhere, sometimes those work, but I think as a general thing where it's been more personal, more conversational, that has worked. One of the best examples I saw, for example, was a leather goods brand that I absolutely love out of Europe called Hardcraft. And a couple of weeks ago, they sent me an email saying, listen, you just click this button if you want to reduce the cadence of our emails to you for the next couple of weeks. We understand that you might not want to kind of purchase in the next couple of weeks. And if you don't want to hear from us, you want to hear less from us for the moment, like that's perfectly fine with us. We'll pick up that cadence again sometime later this year. And I think that was such a smart way. And for example, I didn't, and I've received their emails since. I've not made a purchase, but I like receiving those emails, and I still feel connected to the brand, and I will eventually purchase again. And I think that's, again, coming back to kind of why these email campaigns work, is to literally not think short term, think slightly longer term, building that relationship with your customers, because eventually they will start spending more money again. Eventually, kind of the whole kind of world and economic climate changes again, and it's important then to be in a position where you still have those strong relationships with your customers when they want to kind of make purchases with you again.
Yeah, no, I really like that example. It's definitely something different, and we haven't seen many of that sort of examples before. One thing that I really liked about what you spoke about was how they're sort of showing their brand values in that campaign. And we know that when people sort of share the same values as a brand, they're more likely to buy that brand, they're more likely to be loyal to that brand. So although it might be something that's, they're not being able to communicate with their customers straight away, in the long run, that's going to build the relationship with that customer, and it really shows that brand's values.
Exactly right. And I think if you just think about the kind of greater fundamentals about building a business here for the long term, I think investing in those kind of customer relationships is strengthening the core, strengthening your core, like strengthening the foundations, right? Which ultimately, whether it's kind of, and I think that expands beyond just email marketing. I mean, that is the way to build the kind of business that becomes more resilient over a much longer period of time, regardless of any kind of economic downturn or any kind of macro environmental kind of thing that happens that you couldn't anticipate, right? So yes, that's the mindset here, like to truly build those customers with customers and think longer term and not just about the next sale, the next purchase.
Yeah, another great example of a brand doing this is a jewelry brand called Astra de Mayu, and they've steered away from their product sort of emails, and they've gone towards more building a community. So they're sharing Netflix parties, they're talking about feel-good quotes, inspirational quotes, just really trying to build a community with their customers, which I really like.
Yeah, exactly right. Because and that's almost like that's taking the idea of building one-on-one relationships and then kind of expanding that to building a whole tribe, a whole community, right? And again, it's one of those foundational things. Like if you do that really well, that community is still going to be there in the long term, and it can still be a kind of a positive contributing growth force in your business for that long term.
Yeah, it's definitely a great opportunity. So speaking of opportunities, our next question, it sort of leads me into our next question, is what do you think is the biggest opportunity missed when it comes to email marketing automation?
Yeah, so my mind mostly goes to two things, right? Which is firstly around simplification, and the second is around consolidation. So the simplification part is also simpler, which I think the way I think about email marketing automation is if you have a look at marketing software in general in the last, say, 5 years, right? We've increased the kind of the power and the capabilities of the tools so extensively. But I think that complexity often gets kind of almost lost in translation when it gets to customers. And I think there's a lot that any marketer, and especially kind of email marketers, can do in terms of their email marketing, where they literally say, let me firstly simplify the way I even present my emails or present my brand. So thinking through things like visual consistency across all emails, thinking through what are my voice and tone, being clear about brand values and making sure those things kind of come across. I think those are the simpler things, probably some of the harder things as well to kind of really nail, but mostly the simpler things. This is not about trying to kind of build this massive kind of segmented kind of multi-headed monster campaign here. This is keeping things simple and trying to get the fundamentals right first. So I think that is really the first thing that I think many email marketers miss. The second part around consolidation, I think I'm a big advocate for trying to use only a single ESP, right? Across kind of all the different communications you have to send out there. Now, I fully know that there is no single ESP that can send all the emails that a brand needs to send. If you consider anything from a newsletter to any kind of automated sequence, and then we get into fulfillment related emails or any kind of transactional emails. But the idea again here is around, if you can consolidate that, you essentially give your subscriber a single kind of point of subscription preferences, which means you're less likely to overwhelm them by sending them too many emails at the same time or confuse them, right? Because if you're sending them emails from 3 different places and they need to unsubscribe, they don't really know where they need to unsubscribe. So I think that consolidation, like that first part of the consolidation, I think is important. Try and consolidate as many emails as possible into a single ESP. And I think the utopia would be eventually just have a single ESP across the board. The other kind of part of consolidation here is what I like to kind of think through, and using LoyaltyLion as an example here, is I love the idea of kind of taking as much data as I can, not just for the sake of data, but getting that into kind of one's ESP. So one example, and kind of not to sell the LoyaltyLion and Ecommerce integration, but like one of the things that we tell our shared customers is, even if you just added someone's actual rewards balance, points balance, whatever you want to call that, right? And you just added that to an email, or if there's some kind of tiering, like mention that kind of tier. Like I think that's a great way to consolidate more of that data and essentially kind of level up the types of emails that you're sending.
Yeah, no, I really like that point, definitely. We know that loyalty emails always perform well. I think they get around about a 35% click-through rate. So definitely always good to include some sort of loyalty element. Another thing that I wrote down, that you talked a lot about the user experience and how the customers benefit from, sort of segmenting this down. But a thing that I sort of noted was one of the biggest challenges we often hear marketers talk about is lack of time. And I think what sort of all the points that you've just spoken about really does combat that challenge of lack of time for marketers, and sort of simplifying everything, can give you sort of your time back in a way.
Yeah, and I exactly right. And I like, again, that's why I think, because many of those things, you're not going to change your brand or your brand values or your voice and tone often, right? I mean, those things are probably more evolutionary, and they will probably change over the course of a year or 2 years, right? So if you really nailed those things, you made sure that you were able to use, for example, you were able to use a template within your email marketing kind of automation software that you can reuse, that is always visually consistent. I mean, that means setting it up once, right? And again, those are the simple things to do, like setting up once, and then it probably just requires like kind of you reviewing that on a periodical kind of basis. But really kind of, again, like, because I agree, we work with many, small businesses, and the ultimate definition, and I was always surprised by this, the kind of SMBs are up to, like, depending who you believe, but 300 employees, right? But many of our merchants are much kind of smaller, right? Small teams. And you probably have a marketer that is not just doing email, but they're also doing paid, they're doing SEO, they're doing content, they're doing PR, they're doing all these things. So the more time you can save for things especially where you like complicating things and it's not really shifting the needle, like that's time you have back that you can invest in those other channels, right? Email marketing should not add to your to-do list. Email marketing should help you kind of tick off, more of the to-dos, and help you free up your kind of time and resources to invest elsewhere.
Yeah, that's a great point. So speaking, we kind of sort of touched on loyalty a bit in this question, but our next question sort of surrounds loyalty. So when is it the most impactful time to incorporate loyalty data into a customer's journey, and why?
Yeah, so I like to think about doing it as quickly as possible and pretty much immediately, right? So using the example of a first-time customer that on their first purchase, they didn't, hadn't signed up for the loyalty program on site whilst they were making the purchase. So to literally think, and we've seen success, by the way, in terms of merchants that then either say, for those customers that aren't yet members that made that purchase, then prompt them either in their email receipt or send them a separate email like within the first hour or 2 hours, or 24 hours even, but closely after that first purchase, and say, listen, did you know about our loyalty program? Here are the benefits, here are the reasons to join. And the reason I advocate for that is I think it's about setting the expectations with one's customers. Because, and Seth Godin speaks about kind of marketing with the kind of the mindset of kind of people like us, people like me do X, Y, and Z. So from a loyalty perspective, if you're communicating to a new customer that, that we have a loyalty program, we have X many members, I think what happens, like even subconsciously, but what you are also saying between the lines there is, we are a brand that you can trust, and there's benefits kind of to that. So you're setting and seeding that expectation, which means like that even if they don't sign up immediately, that seed has been planted, and you ultimately see a higher adoption rates of a loyalty program over time, given that expectation, right? If you do, and I think that's the kind of first part, right? That in terms of just kind of signing up new members. But the second part here is, I think you also kind of lay that, you put that scaffolding in place that, which you can kind of piggyback off of in future, right? Where, and again, concrete example where we've seen great success is segmenting an abandoned cart campaign, and for loyalty members that have a minimum balance where they can redeem that for some kind of discount, be able to say, instead of giving them a new $10 discount, say, listen, you have 1,000 points that allows you to kind of redeem that. You get $20 for the 1,000 points, and you can actually use this for that purchase, which is again, like that in itself is great, because you're not giving away a new discount, and you're getting the benefit of kind of truly showing your most loyal customers that this is how this works. Like, you are loyal, and here's the reward, right? So it gets that kind of nice, like, symbiosis going there. But again, like that only works well because from the very first purchase, they knew about loyalty. They were thinking about loyalty. They were thinking about like what does a kind of mutually beneficial and loyal relationship actually look like?
No, yeah, again, completely agree. I really like your point on the sort of hidden message that a loyalty program can show within those follow-up emails and those initial emails. We actually know that if a customer joins your loyalty program, it's a 47% chance of them making a second purchase. So yeah, I think I totally agree with the mindset that it puts a customer in on, and the sort of the way they look at your brand.
Yeah, and you know what, Caitlin, I think like part of this is probably a self-selection thing as well, right? Where like somebody that is going to sign up for your loyalty program, they're also signaling that they're probably more willing to walk a longer kind of road with you going forward, or take certain actions that kind of those customers that don't sign up to loyalty program would do, which I think is from a marketing perspective. And if you had to, like, let's face it, every e-commerce brand eventually has some kind of budget constraint, right, in terms of marketing, which means some prioritization of where I'm going to allocate my resources, whether that's monetary or time. And I think like knowing that these X percentage of my customers are loyalty members, I probably should prioritize like them over these other customers in some way. Like if I could only do one of those two things, or I could only market to one of those two kind of cohorts, I would probably market to my most loyal customers first. So I think in terms of that kind of prioritization, that's really helpful, right? Because as I said, customers are self-selecting and signaling that they're probably going to spend more with you in the future.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Okay, so in the interest of time, that's probably where I'm going to have to wrap things up. But I just wanted to say thanks again for joining us. And if you have any questions, please tweet us using the hashtag. Adii, thank you very much again for joining us and sort of talking us through each question and your views on that.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Caitlin.
And yeah, and then we will make sure we send you the on-demand recording. So look, keep an eye out for that. Thank you, everyone.